Hey everyone, I am Om Dharme and today I will tell you how to make this simple shooting game. You will get to learn a lot from making this, like how to make the player move, how to make the ball move, how to make the ball bounce in horizontal and vertical direction, how to shoot the bullets, how to make projectile, how to detect collisions, how to split the ball, and much more. So, okay, let's get started. So let's start with making a new project. Because we're making a 2D game, I will go for 2D core. Next, we name the game. I am going to name it as Ball Blaster, but you can name it whatever you want. Then we press click project and we wait for a few seconds till it loads up. Now that the project is loaded up, the next step is to configure it. For that, we go to File, Build Settings, and because after we have completed the game, we wish to publish it on the web so that you and any of your friends can play it, we switch the platform to web. It might take another few minutes to complete the whole setup. After the project is set up and configured, the first thing we do is set up the game dimensions. For this, we go to the Game tab and change the aspect ratio from free aspect to 60:9. With this, what happens is that even if we increase or decrease the size of the screen or publish it across web, the aspect ratio remains the same. Next, we make some folders to keep everything we make organized. We start with making a folder for sprites. This will hold all the sprites and images for the player, the background, and whatever. Next, we make a folder for audio. This will hold the music that we provide to the game. After that, we make a folder for the scripts. This will hold all the scripts that we make. Now the next step is to import sprites. You can download all the sprites from the link in the description, or you can even create your own sprites. The sprites include balls of different sizes, a bullet to shoot them, a player to fire the bullets, the colors representing the background and the ground, along with a restart button. Now we will modify the properties of some of the sprites. And if you're following along exactly like I am, then you also have to make those changes. So we will select all the sprites and change the pixels per unit from 100 to 16. Then we will also change the filter mode from bilinear to point no filter and change the compression from normal to none. And finally, we apply. If you make these changes, all the sprites will be imported exactly the way they were created. Also, three of the sprites need to have the pixel per unit value different. It should be 32. So we will also modify that and apply. Next, we design the look of our game. For that, what we need is the tile palette. If you don't see the tile palette tab in Unity, you need to go to the Windows tab, click on 2D and press on the tile palette. After this, you will be able to see the tile palette tab. Next, we drag the background sprite to the tile palette. You will be asked to create a folder to maintain all the tiles. So I'm just going to go ahead and create a folder with the name tiles. And then our background sprite will be added to the tile palette. We will repeat the same thing for the ground sprite. We drag it and drop it and save it. Now using these two palettes, we will be able to create the ground and background of our game. Now using the tile map, we are going to draw some tiles. To draw the tiles, first we need to create a tile map. So we go to the left panel and create using 2D tile map rectangular. Then I name the tile map to background. Then we go to our tile palette. We select the tool which is like a square brush, and using the blue color, we paint all over it like that. We also repeat the same thing for the red color. So I'm going to create another tile map using 2D tile map rectangular. I'm going to name it as ground. Make sure that the ground is selected. We don't want to paint over the background layer again. So make sure the ground is selected. Select the red color, the same tool, and then again paint. You can even see how it looks by going to the game tab. So this is how it looks. I think the ground looks a bit too big. So I'm going to erase one layer of it. So using the eraser tool, which I just selected, we erase one layer. And now we see, so okay, now that looks a bit better. So that is how you draw using tile palette and tile map. So now let's try adding the ball with the biggest size to our game and let's see how it looks. So I think that looks a bit too big for our game. So what I'm going to do is increase the camera size. You can decrease the size of the window by scrolling in the main tab. And then what I'm going to do is press on the camera and increase its size. What this will do is it will expand our field of vision and hence we will see the things a bit small. I think that's still that looks okay. So now I need to repaint some stuff. So I'm again going to go on background and paint the blue color. And similarly, I'm going to go on the ground and paint with the red color. Yes. And then also I obviously need to erase the upper part. So make sure ground is selected. Click on the eraser and erase it. And now if you look in the game, I think that looks pretty good. I think the ground looks a bit too small now because we increased the size. So I will paint it once more to make the ground a bit bigger. And now if you look in the game, I think, yeah, that looks good. Let's set a player now. So I'm going to drag the player from the sprites folder to the hierarchy and I'm going to move it a little bit. You can move it using the move tool as shown. Now I want the player to be behind the ground because I don't want to show the whole player, only maybe the top part of it. So I'm going to go in the inspector and change the order in the layer. I'm going to keep it in the same order as the background and hence it is behind the ground and maybe move it a bit and let's see how it looks. So maybe put it more below to see. Uh, okay, maybe a bit more. I don't like the sprite. So I'm going to push it a little more below so that it looks like a machine which is just firing bullets. Okay, that's good. Next, let's create a ball script. So let's go into the scripts folder, right click, create C hash script. Let's name it ball. Give it a few seconds to load all the things it needs. Then drag the script and put it on the ball. And then make sure that it is added here. One thing to note is keep saving the project every few seconds. As you can see, the star means it's not saved, so I will press Ctrl S and it gets saved. So keep doing it every few minutes. Okay, now before getting into the script, we need to do a few things, and that is let's see what the ball needs to do. The ball needs to collide with the ground and go back up. So I need to detect the collision between the ball and the ground. So I need to add colliders to it. So let's start with the ground. I go on ground, add component, tile map collider 2D. Let's go in the scene. As you can see, the boundary is already perfect, so I'm not going to change it anymore. Let's go to the ball and add a circle collider. So the boundary helps us in detecting the collision. So if you want to change it, you can change it using by pressing this button. So that is how I can change the boundary for collision. I'm going to keep it as it is and deselect it. So now we have set up the two colliders. Next, what we want, that we want the ball to move, right? So we need to provide a rigid body component to the ball. So rigid body 2D, everything is 2D here, okay, because we are working in 2D. Now using rigid body, we'll be able to give velocity and we can make the gravity work on the ball and so on. Also make sure to check the if trigger option. We don't want the collision to affect the movement of the ball, right? But we do want to detect the collision and so we do it using the if trigger option. You can go by double clicking the script, and this here is a script. Okay, so before you start writing anything, I will tell you about the start and update method. The start method is executed once the moment the script comes into play. So the object along with the script, when it comes into the scene, the start method is executed once. On the other hand, the update method runs every frame for that object. Okay, so I will just clear this comment first, and we'll start with declaring a variable of the type rigid body 2D and name it as RB. We need this variable to access the rigid body 2D component that we defined earlier. We need it because this is the component that handles all the velocity or the gravity of the ball. Then in the start method, we initialize the variable. We call the method called as getComponent, and tell it the type we want. So we give it rigid body 2D. So the rigid body 2D component from the ball is fetched, and because it is a function, we end it with a parenthesis. Next, we give the ball the initial velocity in the y direction. We do it because we don't want the ball to just drop off the moment it is generated. We give it the value 2f. Next, we wish to detect the collision between the ball and the ground. And because we had checked the trigger option on the ball, we have to use the method onTriggerEnter2D. So the moment the trigger is activated, this function is called. The parameter called as collision here helps us to know the information with which the ball collided with. Next, we check if the object the ball collided with has the name ground. Make sure you name it exactly how it is in the hierarchy. Like I had capital G, so I'm putting capital G here. And if it is indeed ground, then all I will do is reverse the velocity so that reverse the velocity in the y direction so that the ball bounces back up. The problem with this is that the ball will keep decreasing velocity in the y direction. It won't keep on bouncing to the same height. So what we do is we use a trick, and the trick is that for every third jump, we increase the velocity of the ball by a bit. To do this, we create a new integer variable called as jump count. Jump count will keep track which number jump we are doing, and we want the variable to have values from 0 to 2. And it should keep going from 0, 1, 2, and back to 0 and so on. So we do this by adding 1 to jump count for every collision and then dividing it by 3 and getting the remainder, so that the value keeps on switching between 0, 1, 2 and back to 0 and so on. Next, we check which number jump is going on. Because we want to increase the velocity for every third jump, that means we have to check for the value of 2 for jump count. And if the value is not 2, that means we just want to reflect the ball with the same velocity, hence we just update it with the negative of it. And if the value of the jump count is 2, that means we have to give it some additional velocity, so we multiply the velocity by a factor of 1.04. Now let's see if our code works. So I'm just going to increase the height of this ball a bit, and let's see, play. So now you will see the ball almost goes to the same height. It decreases a bit, but for every third jump it will bounce back a bit more, and so on. Okay, so it's working great. Now we need to work on the X movement of the ball, but at the same time we don't want the ball to fall out from right or left, so we also need to create a boundary on the side. So what I will do is create another tile map, 2D object tile map rectangular, and I will name it as wall, and I will paint it using the same color. So there goes the left wall, and there also goes the right wall. Okay, sometimes that happens. Yes. And also have to order the layer. So because it's on the same level of the ground, I'm going to keep the order -1 so that always remains in front of the background. Okay, so now let's look at the horizontal movement for ball. So let's start by creating a serialized field. A serialized field is something whose value we can change using Unity. So outside of the script, we can change the value. The data type will be float, and let's name the variable horizontal speed, and let's give it the initial value of 5. Next, we set the horizontal velocity of the rigid body equal to that of the speed. Next, what we want to do is we have to detect the collision of the ball, but this time with the ground. So the code is pretty much same like before. We use the same block of code to detect the collision with the wall. So instead of ground, we'll have wall. And in that case, what we want to do, we want to change the value of horizontal velocity with negative of what it was. So in the x direction, the velocity gets reversed. So it feels as if it is getting bounced off the wall. So before we see the gameplay, there is one thing we forgot, and that is to add colliders to the wall. So let's just do that. Add component, tile map collider 2D, and the boundary is perfect. So I'm not going to change anything there. And let me show you how serialized field looks. So if I click on ball and look at the script, you can change the value of the variable from here. So that is what a serialized field is. So let's play and see. Loading. Okay, and that's how it looks. So it's definitely bouncing off the walls. Looks pretty smooth. Great. Okay, so now let's work on the player script. So I'm going to create a new script. I will name it player. Give it a few seconds to do the setup. And after it, I'm going to attach it to player. Okay, so it is attached. Great. So what we want the player to do is, first of all, move horizontally. Second, we want the player to fire a bullet, and that's all. The other work will be done by the bullet. So two things we have to do. So let's get into it. So we'll start with creating a serialized field which will hold the value of the speed we give to the player. Again, its data type will be float, and let's give it an initial speed of 5. Now, because we want to play with the velocity of the player, we also need its rigid body to the component. We have not yet created this component, but we can also add the component after writing the script. And just like before, in the start method, we get access to that component using the get component method. Now all we have to do is detect input. So if my input is the left arrow key, which I can know by checking for input dot get key and putting in the key code for the left arrow. If this is true, that means I have pressed the left arrow key, and in that case I have to put the velocity of the player as minus speed, so it will go in the negative x direction. And similarly, if the input detected is for right arrow key, the velocity will be plus speed, so it will move in the right direction. And if it is none of those, it means we have not pressed anything, and in that case the player should not move, hence its velocity should be equal to 0. So I will just save the whole project once so that nothing happens. Okay, now the first thing we have to do is add a rigid component to player. So let's add a component rigid body 2D. We don't want gravity because we don't want the player to fall off. It's fine if it stays where it is. And okay, so let's play and see. So now if I press my arrow keys, my player can move. Great. Let me actually increase the speed and see. Let me increase it from 5 to 15. Now if I try to move my player, it's way quicker. So you can experiment with different speeds and see what suits you. And if you actually stop the game, then this value resets. Okay, yeah. One thing to note here is that if I play and if I move the player to the extreme right or left, the player will eventually disappear. Because what happens is it goes beyond the wall. So what's the solution for it? So what we have to do is add a collider to the player so that it eventually collides with the sidewall and stops in its way. So what I'm going to do is add a component, box collider 2D, change the boundary to almost just the top. You can zoom in and zoom out using the scroll option, and that's it. So now if I play, you will see that the player doesn't move up beyond the wall, so it gets stopped here. It cannot move. Okay, great. Now before seeing how we write the code for player firing a bullet, we actually need the bullet. So let's go into the sprites and bring up the bullet. So let's see if you can see it. So this is how it will look. So okay, that looks good. But what I am going to do now is create a prefab of it. So what is a prefab? Prefab helps when we are going to create the same kind of thing many times, or the same kind of thing is going to use in many different ways, which is almost similar. And so when I make a change to the prefab, all the others also get changed. So if I actually make some change to a bullet prefab, all the bullets will reflect that change. So I'm going to go into the assets folder. I will create a new folder called as prefabs, and I'm going to put the bullet in it. So when I bring the bullet here, it automatically gets created as a prefab. And we create a prefab here for bullet because we are going to shoot many bullets, all of which work in exactly the same way. All of the bullets will be shot by the player. They will get hit to the ball, or they will get missed, whatever. All of them will work in the same way. Hence, we created a prefab of bullet. The next thing we need for a player to fire a bullet is to define a firing point from where the bullets will get fired. So I'm going to go into the player and create a child. I will start with an empty child, and I will name it as fire point. What happens when I create this as a child is that whenever the player moves, the fire point moves along with it. Okay, so if I, okay, let me actually position it a bit. I'm just going to go and place it just above the player, right there. Okay, so now if I move the player, let's see here, the fire point moved along with it, and that's what we want. Okay, so now that we have the fire point and the bullet, let's get into the player script and see how firing a bullet will work. Okay, so first we create a serialized field of the transform component type, and we put in the fire point here. We use transform component because transform tells us about the position and rotation of the object, and that's the only thing we're interested when it comes to the fire point. Next, we create another serialized field of the type game object because we wish to pass the whole bullet here and not just a part of bullet but the whole bullet. So that's why we have the game object. So now all we have to do is detect the spacebar key because I want the player to shoot when the spacebar key is pressed. But unlike before, instead of get key, we are going to use the function get key down because I want the bullet to be fired only once when the key is pressed and not keep firing the whole time the key is pressed. Just once when the key is pressed. So I'm going to detect for the key code for space, and when I do, what I'm going to do is call the shoot method. Now what we want the shoot method to do is make a bullet, right? So how do we make something? when given the game object, we use the instantiate method. The first thing we pass it to is the game object that needs to be created, then the position where it needs to be made. So we pass in the position for the fire point and the rotation with which it should be made, and then we again pass the same rotation as the fire point. So at the fire point now, because of the shoot method, the bullet will be created. So now let's see the gameplay. But before that, we have to do a few things. First of all, I don't want the bullet to already be there. That doesn't make sense. So I'm going to just go ahead and delete these. Then I'm going to go in my prefabs folder and maybe if, why not rename this. So I will just name it to bullet. Then I'm going to go into the player script and give it whatever it needs. So it needs the transform of fire point. I will just drag and drop the fire point, and automatically the transform will be passed into this, as you can see, and then it needs the bullet. So I'm going to go take the bullet from the prefabs folder and pass it to it. Okay, so now let's run and see how it plays out. Okay, so the movement is smooth, and now if I press space bar, as you can see, a bullet is created. Of course it doesn't move because we have not given it any code to move, but point is that we can keep on generating bullets, and we can see here that bullets are keeping on getting created. Now let's finally make a script for the bullet. So I'm going to go into the scripts folder, create a script, name it as bullet, give it a few seconds, and then pass the bullet. Okay, it's still working on. Okay, so what we need the bullet to do is get started with the velocity. If it hits the ball, then we remove the bullet. The splitting part of the ball will be done by the ball, so we will get to that later. If the bullet misses the ball and goes beyond our arena, then also we remove the bullet, because we don't want to have many missed bullets out there. That will just make our game laggy. So we have to do uh, two things mainly. One is the bullet shoots the ball, second is it misses the ball. Let's open up the prefab here. So this is the prefab. Then I go back to the scripts folder, take the bullet and move it here. Okay, so now let's get working on the script. So we start with creating a serialized field speed so that we can change the speed of the bullet anytime from the Unity. We'll give it the initial value of 20, and if needed we can change it later. Next, we also create a rigid body because we want to play with the velocity of the bullet, so we will be needing that. Next, just like before, we will get the component using the get component method. Now, because we want the speed only to be in the y direction, we will put the velocity as transform.up, which is basically 0, 1, so only in the y direction times speed. So now we have given the initial velocity to the bullet. Now we check the condition for when the bullet misses the ball. So bullet keeps going in the y direction, and when it exceeds certain y coordinate, we wish to destroy the bullet. So we destroy the bullet using the destroy method. So now the question is, what is that y coordinate beyond which we want to destroy the bullet? So to know that, we head back to Unity. Now we take one of the sprites. So let's just take the player sprite, move it in the y direction so that we can determine the y coordinate. So we'll move it beyond the arena and check out the y coordinate. So it is 11.27. So approximately we can say that beyond 11 y equal to 11 value, we can destroy the bullet. So we put in that value. Next, we are going to write the on trigger enter 2D method like before. We are going to keep our bullet with the trigger option checked on because we don't want the collision to hinder any of the bullet's movement. So we are going to check the trigger option and detect the collision using this method. And because the only collision a bullet can have is with a ball, we are not going to check if the collided object is ball or not. We will directly assume it's a ball, and when the bullet collides with a ball, we'll destroy the bullet. So now before running the code, we are going to make the required changes. I will double click this to have an expanded view. We already have a script here. We need to add a box collider 2D. The first thing I do is check the trigger option and then press on this button to manipulate the boundaries. So I'm going to bring this a bit inside from here, and maybe the top a little bit more below. So okay, that should be enough. We also need to add a rigid body component. So I add rigid body 2D. I will have no gravity here. I don't want gravity to work on it. And okay, that should be enough. Now let's see the gameplay. Okay, before seeing the gameplay, make sure that the fire point is certain distance above the player. Okay, that should be like at least enough distance. Okay, don't just stick it to it because then the bullet will disappear here itself. So I'm going to keep it here. Okay, so that's enough. Okay, let's see the gameplay. Okay, so the bullets are shooting. If I shoot a ball, the bullet gets disappeared. Keep looking on the left part. If I miss the bullet, a bullet is created, and once it leaves the screen, it also disappears. So that's great. The next thing we need to work now on is splitting up the ball. The one thing I cannot do here is while moving I am unable to fire, and that is because of a bug we accidentally wrote in the player script. So let's look at it now. So in the player script we don't have to write the space detection in else if. We will have it in entirely different place, so here, independent of the previous else if block. And now if we play, we would be able to shoot and fire at the same time. So let's look at it if that's possible. So as you can see, I can move and fire at the same time. Excellent. Now let's work on splitting of the ball. We start by creating another serialized field. It will hold the next ball to be created when the ball is supposed to split, and so I will name it next ball. Next one, what we want to do is we have to detect when the ball hits the bullet, right? So I will again go into the on trigger enter 2D and check for the collision with the bullet. But unlike before, instead of checking with a name, we are going to check by a tag because there will going to be a lot of bullets, not just a single bullet, and so we cannot identify it by name, but by a common property of all the bullets, and that will be the tag. I will explain it more when we see the gameplay. So I will compare the value of the tag with bullet, and if it matches, then what we do is check if the next ball exists, because in case of the smallest ball, the next ball won't exist and hence we won't create anything. But if it does exist, what we're going to do is call a create next ball function, and we will call it twice because we want two balls to be generated. And now let's see the create a next ball function. So what it will do is just like before, call the instantiate method to generate the next ball. So the first thing we pass is the next ball, the game object, then the position where it should be generated. So we use the current game object, the ball which is supposed to be split up, and we use the position of that, and we also use the rotation of the current ball. Now, because you want the balls to be generated in opposite directions, that is with the opposite speeds, we need to change the speed of the next ball before we generate it again. So what I'm going to do is I will call the get component ball. So with this, I will get the script ball which we have attached and then get the speed field from it, the horizontal speed. And then I'm going to set it to negative of its own. So that the next time the ball is generated, it is generated with the opposite horizontal velocity. Okay, so let's look at the gameplay. But before that, let's do all the setup it needs. First of all, I'm going to rename this ball to ball 5 to just ball 5. Next, we need to add a tag to bullet. So I'm going to go to the bullet prefab. As you can see, it is untagged. So I'm going to go and add a tag. Go to plus, add tag called bullet, save. Then make sure to go back to the prefab and select the tag. Okay, so now we can now the ball can detect the bullet collision, and next thing we do is add the next ball. So how to do that? We don't even have a next ball. Now remember what I said about prefab, that it can be used when the uh, same thing is supposed to be used multiple times, but with a very minute difference. Now because the next ball that we generate is also going to be with the same kind, the same behavior, the same kind of bouncing from the ground or the side wall and so on. So I'm going to create a prefab for ball 5. So I'll just go here and create a prefab. So that's the prefab for ball 5. Now I also need a ball 4, a ball with a smaller size. So what I'm going to do is go here, not here. I'm not selecting the prefab, I'm selecting the object in the hierarchy. Go to my sprites folder and take the ball 4 and put it in the sprite renderer. So here, so now this became a small. I am also going to change the circle collider here and decrease its size so it matches, and of course everything else remains the same, like the rigid body, the ball script and so on. So that was my ball 4. Okay, so it's an updated ball 5. So I'm going to rename it as ball 4, and again go back to prefab and bring it down here. So now I have a prefab for ball 4 and make an original prefab. So now I have two prefabs, one is ball 5, one is ball 4. And then now from the hierarchy I will delete this ball 4, bring ball 5 here. Then I will go to the ball 5 script here. As you can see, next ball is none, and then I will put ball 4 here. Okay, so now I think everything is set up. So let's see the gameplay. Okay, and now let's fire and see. Okay, as you can see, we have two balls, but we did not destroy the original ball, so that was a bug. So let's do that first. Okay, so I will go back to my script, and when the collision with bullet happens after creating the next balls, what we do is we destroy the current game object. Great. And at the same time we also need to increase the speed of the smaller ball. So I'm going to go to the ball 4 prefab here, and I'm going to increase this from 5 to 8. Okay, so now let's see the gameplay. We increase the speed of the smaller ball to 8, and original ball already has speed of 5. So now let's play. So now if we fire the bigger ball, two smaller balls with increased speeds are created. Great. And just like that, you also need to create ball 3, ball 2, ball 1 and ball 0, and then it will look way better. Make sure whatever changes you do is actually to the prefab and not over here. So if I actually go back to ball 5, You can see the next ball is not there because we made the change in the hierarchy and not to the prefab. So I'm going to actually make the change to prefab. So ball 5 speed, next ball is ball 4, speed is 5, and for ball 4 there is none. So let's again just like before also create ball 3, 2, 1 and 0. So I'm just going to show for 3 for now. You can do the remaining. So we already have a ball 5. I'm going to go to the sprites folder, take ball 3, change the sprite, change the collider boundary, rename it as ball 3, create its own prefab, original one. Now I will make the change here, so ball 4 should have the next ball as ball 3. Okay, so I have to select from here, so ball 4 will have the next ball as ball 3, and I want the ball 3 to have this as none. So I'm going to go here and click none, and I want the horizontal speed to be let's say 12. So now let's see, ball 5, ball 4, ball 3. Okay, so now I will delete this from here. Let's actually create a level. So I will have ball 5 here with velocity as 5. I will have ball 4 here with, let's say, a negative speed of 8, and ball 3 here with a speed of plus 12. So now if I play, let's see how it plays out. This is how easily you can actually create a level because we have already done all the setup. Okay, so that looks good. Ball 3 just disappears because there is no next ball for it. Ball 4 gets split into ball 3. Ball 5, if I fire, will split into ball 4, which splits into ball 3, and which eventually disappears. Great. Okay, so guys, the video is getting a bit long, so I'll stop here. The game is pretty much done. The only thing we need to do now is create new levels and connect to those levels, and then maybe we'll also add a high score counting mechanism and a way to restart the game from the start. So now you can create any levels as you wish. We have already done all the setup, and if you have any doubt, then mention it in the comments. I will be sure to help you out. So like, share, and subscribe. Tune in for the next video.